Like you said, they did make the wrestling business better.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, obviously, that's the news, and anyone listening to this is going to know that's what the situation is. But, from our take on all of this, it's, maybe this is a good time to sort of revisit a bit of Scott Hall wrestling history and sort of talk about stuff. Because one of the things I wanted to bring today, and this is a really sad thing in its own right, but the trouble is you don't hear as many people talk about Scott Hall today or Razor Ramon today for his in-ring work, because I think obviously those demons that we talked about and everything that he had to overcome in his life kind of took precedent over that for probably the longest time. So whenever you talk about Scott Hall now, he is in that same sort of breath as Jake Roberts and those that kind of work with DDP to put themselves back on track, and they are really, really great stories. But too often I think the emphasis has been on that, or the mistakes from the past, and there isn't as many people nowadays, with the exception of probably those that grew up watching Razor, when they were young, and watching Scott Hall during the actual formation and the growth of the NWO in WCW and everything else. But you don't really see an awful lot sort of acknowledge the in-ring work as much anymore.
No, but when you watch a lot of his stuff and how good he was and why he was given that push as Razor Ramon and as Scott Hall with Kevin Nash as NWO, and even before that kind of stuff, when you watch him in like the early 90s and WCW and AWA.
That's Diamond Stud.
Yeah, Diamond Stud. Gator, he had so many names. Big Gator Scott Hall.
Big Gator Scott Hall, yeah. Well, I think he started his career in AWA, didn't he?
I believe so.
And then went from there to WCW the first time around before his WWF run. But it was, I think, where it really kicks off for him is Razor Ramon.
Oh, definitely, because he was one of the first that I'm aware of, like, wrestlers that had vignettes before they debuted. It was,
yeah. So watching those, and again, like I say we, I mean, I'm going to assume the same for you because it's not too much difference in age, but in terms of obviously where we are kind of watching it like live as things are happening, we're already into Attitude Era at this point, and Razor's one of the faces of the new generation, which came just before. So, we're kind of post-Hogan era,
yeah.
And you've got guys like Brett at the top and Michaels at the top, and in comes Razor Ramon after these weeks of these vignettes, like you said.
Scarface.
Just Scarface, yeah. He's just taken that, what was obviously a popular film. I was going to say at the time, but obviously still a popular film today because it's a great film.
Yeah, but I don't think it was as big as it became.
It's one of those that
I think I was like, as people as the movies get older and people start watching those movies, they get the cult status
there is a cult status to it, yeah.
I mean, we love it for the TV version.
Absolutely. But no, Razor is essentially like an embodiment of the I forgot what his name is, isn't it? Tony Montana.
Yeah.
So he's embodiment of Tony Montana, and from the way that he delivers his promos, and again, those vignettes were so cool. Like when you talk about guys oozing charisma, and the idea of charisma as well, like the term charisma is thrown around a lot nowadays, and sometimes it is very rightly so. But charisma is just one of those things you just can't teach it, can you?
No, and
you've got to either have it or you just don't. Like you can work on it, but Razor Scott Hall is one of those just natural oozing charisma.
Yeah, and also when you watch his vignettes and then you watch Carlito's, how similar put together they are.
I think they're putting together, in that sort of similar vibe. And it's not knock on Carlito, because I like Carlito and actually did like his stuff. But in terms of, I think, the times in which they both came out, Razor just hit at that right moment. I think Razor came in at such a perfect moment, really, for WWF, where they were at that point in time. And, and then, of course, built up the history with the Clique and he, X-Pac, or 1, 2, 3 Kid, Shawn Michaels and Triple H. And then obviously along with Kevin Nash when he comes over as Diesel. But in terms of like that legacy left in WWF for that first run there, as Razor Ramon, Razor Ramon is still one of those, like, people will pick Razor as kind of one of their top guys from that era. From those, again, some of them are super underrated, I think. Super underrated matches, especially in the Intercontinental title scene and picture. He's had some great matches there, but the Razor Ramon run is really not very long at all.
It isn't really. It's like mid 92 to early 96. So you think about it, that's not.
It's like nothing really.
It's like pretty much 3.5 years, near enough.
When you look at the Scott Hall persona, so from WCW onwards, it went on for so much longer. Well, I mean, it was that, and it stayed as that, didn't it?
Yeah.
So it's crazy though but Razor Ramon stacks up, and that just goes to show how much of an impact he had in WWF. And I think, speaking of impact, with leaving a legacy in a company, obviously everyone's going to talk about it, and rightly so. But the famous ladder match from WrestleMania 10.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna watch it when I go home.
It's still one of my. I mean, the two of the matches on that card that I will always sit through is the opener between Brett and Owen, and I will always watch that ladder match because, again, for the time, ladder matches wasn't anything new in wrestling.
No, but they weren't shown on a major scale.
Wasn't shown on a major scale, but it also just wasn't done to this level. You know, it had the heights and the dramas that would then pave the way for, by the time we get to kind of, you know, Dudley's, Hardy's, Edge and Christian, for them to set that kind of new benchmark and that new precedent on it. You know, it was that, and people quote that as the inspiration.
Yeah.
For that generation, for your Edges and Christians and stuff. It's that ladder match that was the benchmark.
And it was very different for WWE at the time to be doing that kind of, because they weren't really doing stuff with weapons at the time, and it wasn't
quite as heavy-handed with it, was it?
No.
I mean, it would be a few more years before we basically kind of swap body slams for chair shots, but
because Kevin Nash tells this story about when they did the rematch at SummerSlam 95, they couldn't use it as a weapon. They could do anything else, but they couldn't use it as a weapon. So, and that match is still good.
It's still, well, exactly. But that's two professionals in Hall and Michaels, isn't it? So, but it is. It's one of the. I think it's going to be at the top of most people's lists in terms of Scott Hall matches. And again, rightfully so, but there is so many other underrated ones out there. He had some great encounters, always had some good matches with, again, it was within the clique, but had great matches with 1-2-3 Kid.
Yeah, I might even watch the Crybaby match when I get in.
The Crybaby match?
I might, he had some good matches with Diesel.
He did have good matches with Diesel, but again, I think when you're close to somebody, your chemistry is a different sort of level anyway, isn't it? Because you're going to know each other better. And
he had some good matches with Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah, some of those Jeff ones are super underrated. I mean, obviously, you got the Bret Hart ones, but they didn't actually face off that many times. And I think because of that heat between Bret and the Clique.
Well,
because it existed at this point in time, wasn't it? When was this? In 93?
They had a match on the Rumble 93.
Which, you know, has got its own stories to it. But I think they had another one or two that year.
They might have done, but I don't know if they worked in WCW together as much.
I don't think so, because of, obviously Bret's run there wasn't, really anything like it was in WWF, was it?
So let's see. Jeff Jarrett, we said, he had a good match with Rick Martel that was setting up for
that unification match.
Yeah.
Rick Martel, on a side note though, I mean, Rick Martel was another guy I think super underrated. People don't really talk about him today, but
when we watched SummerSlam 92,
oh yeah, cracking match with him and Michaels, like just super underrated. I just don't understand why he kind of fell off the radar and he's just not held in that regard as some of the others. I know that the others have had like a lengthier career, but just mad, isn't it? But yeah, the Razor Ramon persona, the gimmick, the character, really not that long in the grand scheme of things, but left an everlasting impression. But I think arguably his biggest contribution to pro wrestling is the jump with Nash to WCW, because it shook up the entire wrestling scene, and there is no denying it. And it sounds so cliched because it gets absolutely drilled into the ground all the time, Monday Night Wars, to the point where it's like it's the most nostalgic like time period for wrestling fans like of our age and our generations and those around it. But it almost sometimes puts you off of it because you have to. They just bang on about it all the time.
Yeah, because everyone wants a newer version of it. They do every single thing in wrestling.
Of course. But as cliched as it might sound, it is undeniable that it changed the landscape of pro wrestling, and obviously it's one of the things that Nash has mentioned in his post. But they did, man. They changed the game. Like when, even before NWO, even before that, him and Nash going over to WCW together was the big kind of, wow, okay, like this is getting serious. Then WCW really could be, you know, genuine. I think that was the first time it was like this is a genuine threat to WWF, because they'd already taken other former WWF talent by that point.
Yeah, like it was your Hogan's.
Hogan's already there.
You had like Bossman, who was,
I think Rick Rude had already appeared at this point.
Rick Rude,
or was it? No, it was after actually, wasn't it? Because he was with
Rick
the
Rude
DX thing.
Retired, so I don't know if he would have been WWE at that point, but. Yeah, they had Hogan, but they also had like
well, they had
Bossman and
Bossman. I think Macho Man
was there, but no
current big stars like Hogan. Arguably, still at that point in time, or probably it's undeniable. Hogan is the biggest name in wrestling still at that point in time.
But I think they were the first since the Monday Night, since September, since Lex Luger.
Yeah, since Luger showing up there, and that, again, big moment, but. At the point in time, Diesel and Ramon are two of the biggest stars.
And they did it properly. They didn't...
Oh, it was done so well.
And it wasn't...
being in the crowd.
Yeah, which I kind of want... If AEW were to do that kind of thing, and like with Moxley when he joined.
It was really cool.
Yeah.
And it had that same sort of vibe to it. But it does come across very different on product now, because we're also in tune with social media, and everything behind the curtain is so much more accessible now. At least, obviously, what we think we know about it, obviously. But, you know, in terms of there being more... I suppose in terms of there being more dirt out there, in terms of what's going on, it's really hard to keep a secret in wrestling, because somebody somewhere is going to leak it and someone's going to find out, and, you know, that's it. But I think that's why you can't replicate that point in time. No. Because it was, you know, the internet, it does exist here, but it's just nothing like the monster it is now. So you seeing those guys show up, and the way that they're selling it on commentary is like, well, what are these guys doing here? Like, you know, they're from the other company, and it's such a big moment in time, and you can still go back and appreciate it, especially if you were sort of living through it. But it was a massive game changer, man. Like, genuinely, the outsiders coming in, and then, you know, fast forward over to Bash at the Beach, 96.
Who's the third man?
Who is the third man? And it turns out to be
probably
Hogan.
Heenan knew, but...
Yeah. But what, I mean, and that's it. And that's the start of the NWO, which, again, in its own right, changed the face of wrestling, because NWO become essentially its own company by the end of it.
Well, that's what they tried.
It was basically. I mean, NWO, you know, obviously the argument's there, and there's, again, it's pretty...
not a club. They're not an elite. They're the NWO.
It's pretty clear that the NWO, unfortunately, by the time it got to that point, you know, was one of the detrimental things for WCW in terms of bringing that company down. But it wasn't the only thing. I think NWO does get credited a lot as the kind of slow death for WCW. But it wasn't, because there were problems already plaguing that company.
There's a lot of things that we could probably do a whole episode on it. But
yeah, exactly. But in terms of that point in time, and then what the NWO would grow to, and especially when you get into the whole stuff with Sting and everything else, I mean, it was the hottest thing in pro wrestling. And that's at the same time as you've got Austin over in the other company. Yeah. I mean, what a time to be alive, man. But
and ECW was brilliant.
Well, ECW, I know ECW does get thrown into the mix because they were that third promotion, but they were different enough that it set them apart, but also they were influential enough that the other two companies kind of had to take from ECW, and they had to bring in the chairs and things like that because they saw people wanting that. Yeah. So ECW 100% left its mark as well. It's a really, really interesting, exciting, and just nostalgic time in wrestling, and Scott Hall is one of the key players in that. He's one of the key players, and there isn't anything anyone can say really to argue that would be true, because he was.
It all starts with Scott Hall, really. You think about it.
I mean, him being coming over to WWF, and I think already having a bit of a relationship with Diesel. I don't know if that relationship though blossomed in WWF though, because the story I remember on Michael's Heart and Triumph documentary, the story was that he'd seen the character in WCW while he was just at home one day watching it, and it's in the character of Vinny Vegas.
Yeah.
And so he wanted to bring him in, and that's how Diesel ended up coming as bodyguard. So I don't know if they kind of blossomed a friendship in WWF first.
They were part of the Diamond Stud, which was a DDP, Vinny Vegas, and
so they must have developed something there.
So they must have. Cause that's why
it must. I mean, the stories seem to indicate that it really blossomed in WWF because of, with the click and everything.
But they would have been
the show.
But they would have been around each other.
Yeah, they would have. Yeah,
and that's the story of why they tried to get DDP and NWO, and that's why DDP became a big star.
Yeah,
because when he's
that and the fact that the guy was great, and considering he came in at such a later age, in comparison to a lot of other guys that come in when they're.
What did he say he was
20s.
35? DDP.
When he started, I think he was definitely 30s, yeah. Which is mad, really. But, man, it's crazy. And then Scott Hall, then, from WCW, back to WWF. Not straight away after it was purchased. I think it was, it wasn't quite a year, was it? But it was towards the end of 2001, I think, because... That's you've got to do that. You've got to do it now. You've got to do the Vince promo. You've got to do it now.
Before.
Okay. You've got to do it. You've got to do it.
I'll try, but
I live for this shit.
Did I do it before?
You've done it before, but it doesn't matter. You should do it every episode.
Fuck you.
Inject. I can't do it because
inject a lethal dose of poison. And I ain't done that probably about a year now.
If I tried doing that, honestly, my voice box would come out of my mouth.
Good.
But yeah, they could bring the NWO in. Well, the NWO at that point then is literally just X-Pac.
It was Hogan, Nash and Hall.
And X-Pac came in though.
He came in later. That's after Mania.
Okay. Was X-Pac contracted to WWF at the time?
Yeah, he was out from injury.
He was, wasn't he? Yeah. Okay. But that didn't really... it wasn't the NWO that we knew from WCW.
No, but it needed to be those three to begin with.
Well, they're the founding members. Scott Hall is one of the founding members. Yeah. And his match with Austin, then leading up to, with Mania. And I don't mean this in a bad way at all. Actually, it's genuinely a very good thing, because it's a gift that you'll always see. Yeah. It's a meme. You know where I'm going with this.
Yep.
Stone Cold Stunner.
Yes.
WrestleMania, man. Like, there's nothing... If anyone was going to give the Rock a run for their money for the Stone Cold Stunner style, it was going to be Scott Hall, man. That was just amazing. It's my favourites are the memes where it's just like him. He takes it and he just keeps flying through space. People make some good stuff.
Also, another moment for that match is when the referees does a slide to do a count, and then Kevin Nash does an elbow drop.
Yeah. I like that match. I know that it's kind of one of those... It gets bogged down a bit because of the... Obviously, Hogan and Rock outshone sort of everything.
Yeah.
And also, I know Austin had previously stated it's not the match that he wanted, because he wanted Hogan. But look, man, Austin and Scott Hall was a dream match really in its own right.
Yeah.
For those two characters.
It's just a shame that with Scott Hall's history with alcohol and the kind of...
Yeah. And again, that's what I mean. That's what's kind of sad about it, is that always goes hand in hand with the Scott Hall stories. And it sometimes, it does oftentimes take away from what he gave us in the ring.
Especially when WCW did that as his gimmick for a bit.
Yeah, really not tasteful. But then
again, they did this with Hawk and WWF at the same time.
Yeah, you can't just point a finger at one company. Wrestling just in general can be very just...
he always said
distasteful.
He always said he wasn't drunk working. But
yeah. But it's a shame. Obviously, I mean, from there, I mean, it was that issue that led to his release from WWE. Obviously, with the plane ride from hell and everything, and he'd been released, I think, like the following day after they landed, or whatever the story is. And that was kind of really it. I mean, him and Nash showed up in TNA together.
Yeah, but that was just... It wasn't the greatest run, but it was them two and Jeff Jarrett, the Kings of Wrestling, and wearing Elvis. Elvis was
Yeah.
really funny. If we get a chance, I think it's the first... No, it's the second pay-per-view. I can't remember which one it was. It might be Final Revolution 2004. And the intro is them just dressed up like Elvis and in a car. It's funny. It's really funny. You should watch it.
There's some good skits. I think definitely going to have to watch some tonight.
But his best impact moment was when him and Insane Clown Posse were in the crowd.
I vaguely remember it. I don't overly remember an awful lot of the run with them in TNA, if I'm honest. And I think the only thing I can like really remember was the first time I saw them in TNA, and I saw Scott get someone up for the Razor's Edge, and I was thinking, how the hell is he still able to do that? And he did. So fair play to the guy. But yeah, I don't remember an awful lot from that run.
No,
I think after then he did go sort of like, I think there might have been some work in the Indies. But I don't. I think after that TNA run, that was really the last kind of full-time run. Yeah, if it was a full-time run.
I don't think he ever had a match in WWE when he got healthy.
No. I think by that point, though. But again, more important than absolutely anything and everything was getting his life back on track. And arguably, I think then his biggest accomplishment of all came after all of that, when he was able to turn it all around. And then again, fast forward 2014 Hall of Fame ceremony.
As Razor Ramon. Yeah,
but rightly so. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's
the same way that it's. But then it was the same way it was Rikishi, weren't it? Not Fatu or.
Yeah, well, it's the character, the Razor. But again, the Razor Ramon character, for how short-lived it was in the company, left a lasting impression, and is Hall of Fame worthy.
And and he's always done the Razor Ramon voice. He's always been that character. No
that's stuck with him. Yeah, he brought that over to Scott Hall, and it's. Again, it's those kind of seamless transitions. Same guy, different name, but the same guy. The bad guy. You know, Scott Hall is, I think, for newer generations, is probably going to be a very underrated name for all of the reasons mentioned previous. But I think we should say, because we've just seen this flagged up, that I think that it has literally, within the last couple of minutes, been announced that his family are together now and they have taken him off of life support. But he's still fighting.
Yeah, I don't understand it myself, but...
Wow. Okay, I mean, we had to start with this, because it's just, again, it's such a big thing. I don't know, obviously, what the situation is going to be by the end of this podcast, or at the very least, by the time this podcast goes out. I think as a fan, I'm just going to go back and just watch some of the best bits, really. I'd imagine and hope maybe WWE would do some sort of special.
Oh, they definitely will. They definitely will.
It'd be a really nice way of maybe compiling some of the stuff that maybe we wouldn't know to go and see as well. But
because there must be some stuff that are in the archives.
Their archive's massive. They'll have everything that isn't TNA, really. So it's going to be all there, isn't it? But man,
he's just never a shame of one of those wrestlers that never won a world title.
Yeah, but again, he's probably another one of those.
I don't think he ever wanted it.
Yeah, he's just another one of those that didn't need it. Jake Roberts' thing, isn't it? Like, just never actually needed the world title.
Like, I think I mentioned this on an episode 8 years ago, that he was the type of person that AEW need now, where he could beat people but still put them over by losing to them like he did.
Yeah.
Because I don't say he let, but in WCW he was meant to beat people like Jericho and Juventud, but he always used to give them the win. And they would always have a go at him backstage, but he'd say, "You can't make people. You got to look at the future, and this guy's one of the future." And obviously with Jericho, he got it right.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a massive blow to the wrestling world. Looking at the outpouring of support through social media, I think everybody is just sending their love, man. Yeah. But it's, on a personal level, it's just, I hate it. You hate seeing this stuff happen anyway. but even more so when it's like it's another piece of your childhood.
Yeah, and
it's a very weird. Obviously, it's nothing in comparison to family and friends and those that know him. You know, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to put it on the same pedestal at all, but you know, for those listening that are going to be in the same boat, you know, all of us fans, it's just horrible, man. Like, you just hate seeing this stuff, and regardless of what a lot of people may have thought of him, especially during certain points in his life, nobody wants to see this happen. But you know, he put the work in and he changed it. And maybe the note to leave it on Ash is just this famous quote, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, it's...
Hard work pays off. Dreams come true. Bad times don't last. But bad guys do.
Yeah, it's just perfect.
It's perfect.
Yeah. I like to think he came up with that as well.
Yeah.
It isn't it?